If you're on the path to becoming the sports PT that you've always wanted to, but you want to know, is there anything else that I should consider before moving forward? This episode is going to be perfect for you. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the podcast. Welcome all new listeners, and welcome back to those who have heard my content in the past. Today's episode is going to be fantastic. It is a personal reflection that I had off of my last vacation. I'll share that with you. But before I go on to the podcast, what is new? I just came back from a week-long vacation. I spent the time with my family, and my father-in-law, my mother-in-law, and we went to Cancun, Mexico, and it was fantastic. But for those of you who don't know, there was about a year ago in my podcast episodes, I was talking about a lot of cancer, a lot about helping people along a different health span. And it was my father-in-law. It was somebody I really respected. And there's a story behind going on this trip. I was scheduled to take a course that I've always wanted to. For those of you who don't know who Tony Robbins is, I was supposed to take a course with Tony Robbins, and I scheduled that about 6 to 8 months ago. I paid the fees, did all those things, and about 3 or 4 months ago, we get a call from my in-laws, and they asked if we wanted to go with them on this trip, and it happened to be at the same time that Tony Robbins was going on. And I'm very into motivational speaking. I'm into changing people's lives and personal reflection and personal development. And I had to make a decision. And it's been a dream of mine to be able to go to one of these courses. And I then had to decide, all right, do I go with my in-laws? Do I take Tony Robbins? And for everyone, that's a simple equation. I went with my in-laws because about a year and a half ago or a year ago, my father-in-law, who I really respect, he's a mentor to me, he was suffering from cancer and had to go through this process and nearly died. And it was quite the experience. And so as I declined the Tony Robbins and I made a decision to go on to Cancun, I really had to think I rarely will get this time with him to spend that one-on-one time to get through, just to understand his life and what he's done and accomplished, and really just have this opportunity to spend it as a family. So we took this trip. It was amazing. My kids and family got to hang out with him, and it was just a good time away. We pretty much just were at the pool, personal reflection time. I started working on my book even more, for those of you who have heard the podcast before. But so great family time, good to be away, and back and rock and rolling with everything that we have. So let's get on to this episode. So while I was at the resort, we were at the pool, and there was a lady with a splint, and I had to ask. I was like, "Hey, what happened? Did you fall? Did you cut your finger?" And she says, "No, it was a boxer's fracture." Of course, I have to say, "Well, how do you get a boxer's fracture? Like, who did you hit?" And here comes her husband walking by. I was like, "That's the guy." She said, "No. I was on a scooter, and I tripped and fell, and I landed on my knuckles." It was just kind of like one of those bird scooters. And so she's recovering from those things, and we happened to start talking. And she said, "My son is in PT school right now. He's a second year, and he's enjoying it." And we're just kind of walking through that. And her husband asked, what is it that, it now as a parent of somebody who's about to enter this field, they're going to go through with it. Are there things that, you would not do again? Are things that you had done differently? And so that was why I came up with this topic. What I wish I knew before going into sports PT. And I was genuinely just having this conversation with the father. And as we went through it all, I really had to think about, deep internally, what I would have done differently. So here we go. Wherever you are, whether you're established, you're new, you're in PT school, wherever phase of PT you're in, I'm going to work through these things with you. And these are my genuine thoughts. And I think that you'll find yourself in them. And you've probably had them before in your life too. I'm coming off of, I have 16 years of experience now, which is crazy to me. I've done a lot in my career. And there is one thing that I would have you consider before moving on any further, and then deciding if that's the path that you want to take. And that one thought is, when I came into this, I got into sports PT. I got into PT in general because of my grandma. I was raised by her. I helped her recover after her hip replacement, and I just kind of took off from there. And I was 13 years old. So that got me into PT. And then once the sports residencies opened up in 2005, 6, 7, I became obsessed with opportunity to just be in athletics, right? Me personally, I loved working out. I loved being in sports. So naturally, I just found my way there. What I loved about it was that, I can help people achieve a certain level of performance. I can help them accomplish the dreams that they ever wanted. And that took me on to working for the United States Olympic Committee, pro sports, NFL Combine, traveling all over the world with pro tennis. And what I think I would have done differently is through that whole time, every one of you who's listening, you're leading with passion, right? You love every aspect of it. And I think that it's not just about that. I think you have to, most of you lead with your heart and that passion, but you really have to lead with your head. And what I mean by that is this profession has changed over the last 10 years dramatically because of insurance reimbursements, policies, all these other things that hopefully the APTA one day, conquers or challenges. But the reality is we're boots on the ground. We see people day in, day out, and what they do with the APTA and insurance policies and all these other things don't affect our day-to-day. And while all you want to do is treat, that's essentially all you want to do. I want to get athletes on my schedule. I want to have people feeling their best. That's what you want to do. But the challenge becomes you also have to survive. And for many of you, you find yourself at this kind of breaking point where maybe you're working in a hospital. Maybe you're working in an insurance-based setting. Maybe you work in a cash-based setting. In other case, you find yourself thinking like, gosh, is this the amount of work? Is this the emotional investment that I want for maybe your compensation or the reward you get out of it? And I said, I think we've always led with our heart, but I think you have to lead with your head too. So before you dive into sports PT, before you dive into what you want to do, is this something that will sustain you for that time period? And not a lot of people think about that. And I think people are easy to say, hey, I want to work pro sports. But they don't think about the logical headspace that needs to be thought of afterwards. Well, how many hours would you be working? Well, I don't know. I just want to lead with my heart. I just want to be passionate about something. Well, the reality is, if you work pro sports, you're probably making less than $2 an hour. When you do the math on how much actual treatment you're doing. There's days where you're doing 16-hour days. Some days you're doing 18-hour days. Some days you do 2-hour days. Some days you're traveling for 24 hours and you're always doing it. The challenge becomes, are you leading with your heart or your head? And as you go down this pathway, if you are fulfilled and if you love what you're doing, and you feel like you have a stable home, you have everything else behind that, that's fantastic. But I would have never thought about that. And here I am 16 years later, I've had a different path. For those who don't know, I've worked in pro sports. I've completed residency. I worked in pro sports for about 7 to 10 years, opened up my cash pay practice, grew it to 3 locations. And now I see it from a different lens, where I'm not affected by necessarily what the APTA does or our national legislation or what insurance does. And that gives me a different scope, a different view, a different lens of what our profession can be. So anyone who I mentor, anybody who I'm in touch with, anytime you have a conversation with me, that's the frame of reference that I'm looking at. Not the frame of reference where I just want to get better clinical skills so I can do better. But the reality is, if you don't see what's coming to our profession, you don't create action. By the time it hits you, it's too late. And then you find yourself in this crux of, is this, I feel like there's no work-life balance anymore because I'm working all these hours. Yeah, but that's your fault. You put yourself in that position. Or is it your perspective or standard? Because if you want to work with athletes and you want to be able to work with the highest level athletes and work in pro sports, there will be no work-life harmony, balance, whatever word you want to use nowadays. Because it just doesn't exist. Not when you're working with this high caliber or working with these type of people. Why? Because they have high expectations. So the reality is, if you're working in ortho, or any other specialty and you want to come over to sports, you have to really consider, is this what you want? Because just because you love working with athletes doesn't mean that you love working with them 14, 16 hours a day. What about weekends? What about when they text you? What about when they email you want new programs? And you just want a break. What you fail to consider is, leading with your head, is that the thing that I want? And if you always just lead with your heart, you're going to get burned. And then that's when you start debating, PT burnout. PT burnout is for average, mediocre physical therapists. Average. Meaning, if you think that there's work-life balance, it means that you want harmony. You want a balance. Balance, by definition, is average. Let me give you an example. If you work on just getting CEUs, how many are required by your state? 2 per year, 1 per year. Do you hit that minimum or do you go above it? For most, they hit the minimum because you want that balance. There's no way that you could become more successful if you're working on the bare minimum. Now, if that's what you want, that's okay, but you can't just lead with your heart and say, I just want to work with athletes, but not put in time, work, effort, all the above. That's a personal consideration. But if you never thought about it, it's very easy to dream about it. There's something called the someday syndrome, and that's where people find themselves. Someday I'll work with more athletes. Someday I'll work for a high-end performance institute. Someday I'll work with more cash pay active people. You're in the someday syndrome. So if you're taking the bare minimum to push yourself, minimum CEUs, only 39.5 hours being in the clinic, no more, no Saturdays, no weekends, no lunches. How would you expect to work with higher level individuals, work with athlete population who require after hours, who require longer days? That's just the nature of it. So as I reflect back, I don't know if a new grad was, if somebody in undergrad was asking me, I want to get into sports or ortho, is it worth it for me? I then have to ask, are you willing to put in hours? Are you willing to be above average and not bare minimum? Then you can do well in sports. But the problem is most people can't hang. They can't tolerate that for a long period of time. It's fine until you have kids. And then they want to change. Well, I didn't know I had to be working more hours. Well, that's just what happens when you work with elite level sports or athletes or those type of things. Now, if you're looking at it from a monetary perspective, you're going to have a financial cap because of insurance rates. If you're employed now, you need to know that. If you're employed by an insurance-based company, you have to know you're capped. Why? Because they can't bill insurances for what more than you can produce. So therefore, you will always be stuck. Now, if you want to cruise bare minimum, 40 hours, shoot, that's the lifestyle. That's fantastic. But you're probably listening to this episode to try to figure out, is there anything else I need to consider as I move towards this direction? Yes. There's better financial opportunities in sports. If you go pro sports, you got that's big passion, but then also you have to have some logic. How long is this for me? Now, the one exception, I'm biased here. I think cash-based physical therapy, out-of-network physical therapy is a huge domain, but it's not for everyone. It's for the person who's not bare minimum CEUs. It's the person who's not, I'm going to clock in at 40 hours. I don't want to work during my lunches. I don't want to take my notes home, and I don't want to work weekends. Then it's not for you. It's for the person who's leading with their heart, just loves it, like deep-rooted passion. I want to be the best version of myself. But then also shows it. It's not afraid to back that up. And then also who wants to be compensated. It's one of the only way outs. And if you're new or young in this profession, consider these things, that just your passion for helping people is not enough. That you have to think about logically, what does this mean for me down the line? And some people there's not a lot of people who would tell you this. Who would tell you this? Your employer? No. Who would tell you this? Your parents? No. I was talking to the dad of the husband of the boxer's fractured wife. His name is John. And I said, there's two types of people who support you in their life. Two main types. There's your parents, who are, they're really cute. They're like empathetic. They're here to support you just in case you fall. Their job is to keep you at equilibrium, slightly above. But they tell you, they push you. They tell you, be the best version of yourself. The problem is they can't get you there because they've never been to where you want. So they can't drive you forward. They can only support you and tell you, you're the best. Don't worry about it. Just keep going. That's everyone's parents. But the reality is, if you don't have people ahead of you pulling you towards that destination, you're not going to move at the rate that you need. So if you're relying on your parents for support, relying on your peers for support, all their job is to support you to make you feel good. But there is no one pulling you in the direction. Those people are lifting you to keep you high. There's no one pulling you in that direction. And if you're going to want to be in sports, you're going to need to find somebody who pulls you in that direction. And it won't be on your own. You won't be able to do it by yourself. It's just not possible. And the reality is that when you get into pro sports, you're not thinking about all these things. You're just, I want to work with more athletes. And that's great. But as John asked me that question, I said, the reason I got into mentoring, the reason why I got into coaching is because I saw too many people wasting their talent on, but I have a good, stable, steady position. I get it. But the reality is you need people pushing you in the direction that's best for you, not just what's comfortable. Most people choose ortho because it's comfortable, stable, easy. And when you come over to athletes, high-end, pro sports, cash, it requires a significant amount of work. What you do in ortho, there's no way. Ortho at its highest is the base in cash. We call it double A, maybe minor leagues. And when you come over and you're working in pro sports, it requires that you're on regularly, that you have high intent, you're purposeful about everything, and you're not just leading with love, but also leading with your head to help somebody find solutions that they need and not just being empathetic for them. And once you get that, then you have to decide, shoot, is that what I want? Do I want to work those long hours? Do I want to be emotionally invested? Do I want to take that home? Do I want to create programs on my off hours? I can't answer that for you. But if you're sick and twisted in the head like me, you understand. You're like, that's all I want. That's like, to this day, that's what drives me. I mean, there's numerous times that my wife will, for those of you who don't know, my wife, my boss, Stephanie, she's a physical therapist as well. And, when I met her, she says, I was sick in the head. And, but that's what drove her in our relationship. She was like, I love that you were just so involved. You just wanted to conquer the world. And as we've kind of grown together as a couple, now we have 3 kids, Zach, Jacob, and Alex, we have to then understand, as I've grown with this passion and I'm still going this direction, our passions still have to mix. But if both of us were passionate about physical therapy and changing people's lives, it'd be very difficult for us as a family, as a unit, as a business, to be able to run efficiently at all cylinders. People don't think about that long term. But we did. We thought about, okay, how do we balance our lives, but still maintain that? And for many people, when they choose sports, they don't think about those things. So all in all, what I would tell you right now is, what's the financial opportunity that you want? You have to consider that on your own. What's the hours that you're willing to do? What's the emotion you're willing to do in sports PT? Because passion will dwindle once you're low in energy, your weekends are gone, you have a family, you have kids. And so if that's the case, then just know maybe it's a 5-year sprint and you love that. But it's better that you have a general idea and a plan versus going all in and thinking this is a solution to your problems. No, the problem is that you haven't thought that far. You're going day by day, week by week, year by year, When in reality, you start to think about, shoot, I didn't think about that 10 years down the road, 15, 20 years down the road. And maybe you don't have to go that far, but what you should do is go beyond today and tomorrow. Maybe even this year, and start thinking, okay, great. Is this what I want? How long is this sustainable? Because if you're an undergrad and you're considering going to pro sports, but you don't want to put in those hours, you're not willing to take more than 2 CEUs because my company doesn't give me a budget for it. So spend your own money. Invest in yourself. But no, if you want to be bare minimum, then that's the result you get. And keep dreaming, keep aspiring with the someday syndrome. That's fine. Those people stay in that category. But for those who are looking to work with athletes, pro sports, higher level, then that's a different commitment. And once you realize that, then you can make the best decision possible. So I would say, all in all, if I was going to do this all over again, and let me answer that question. Would I change anything different? No. I just wish that somebody had talked to me about this before, because I landed exactly where I wanted to. But that was my route. That was my path. But as I mentor physical therapists around the world, I realized that doesn't always happen for everyone. And it's only because they didn't set a plan. They didn't know which direction they were going to go to. They were taking it day by day. And when that day became the same Groundhog Day, day in, day out, they felt there was no time, no way for another path, another route. And the problem is that you really just didn't think about it. You led with your heart, not your head. And now you felt stuck. And once you feel stuck, you feel like you're doing the same wheel. That's what burnout happens. That's how it happens. It's mental burnout. It's not physical. You can't tell me that you work in ortho and sports and it's that physically demanding. So it's a mental burnout, which means it's a standards problem. It's perspective problem. It's you didn't think it was going to be this much work, and therefore your expectations are different than reality, and therefore you're working harder in your perceived mind than you should be. That's what burnout is. So before you change your career path, before you start looking for just something new, change your expectation, change your standard. What's the thing that you want? Do you want the skills to be able to do more? Great. Then you have to pay with time, energy, efficiency, get better at what you do, get better at your craft. You're going to be putting more hours. That's just the nature of it. Not a single pro athlete has gotten to where they are with putting in the minimum. Every single pro athlete, every athlete, even you, high school, college, the only reason you got there is because you spent, after practice, throwing a couple more balls, a couple more free throws, a couple more shots, extra sprints. Every athlete has put in more time and energy to get where they want. Yet you're saying, I want to put the least amount of work possible and get the most benefit. It's not even possible. Not in athletics, not in your professional career. And for that reason, I think you really have to just change your reference and your standards for, do I really want to work with athletes? And in sports, because it's going to require more time. I can't be bare minimum. There's not even burnout possible. That's the fun part. Burnout's not possible because you're just constantly going. There's no breaks. Now there's seasonality to working with athletes because there's always in season, off season, whatever it is. And so because of that, there's down periods. But there's also some what I call tax seasons where in the fall it's heavy football, in the spring it's heavy baseball, in the summer is your downtime. So as long as you know that, change your reference and now know that you're going to have ebbs and flows in the amount of work that you produce. So before you go further into sports PT, is this the direction? I'm not trying to deter you. Just trying to change your reference point is this what you want? And is this like the vision you've always had? And it's okay to change. So one thing I've learned over time, it's okay to change. It doesn't mean you're a failure if you're like, hey, I don't want to go this route. Nobody would really care. Not me, not your parents, not your siblings, not your coworkers. Because they're going to carry on with their life the next day. The reality is the only person who cares is you and your own internal judgment. So if you love sports, stay with it. If you're like, I didn't know that was that heavy, then get out. It's okay, go a different route. Maybe go ortho with a couple high school athletes. But if you're like, I'm all in, everything you're saying, I'm all in, then you're on the right path. For some of you, you're still teeter-tottering in the middle, and that's okay. Hover there. But now I've just given you perspective on what that means for your professional career. Now you actually can see 2, 3, 5 years down the line. And that's the best perspective to have versus, I have no idea what's ahead of me. You either have blinders or you have lights. And for that reason, I would say if I would do it all over again, lead with my head. What do you want down the line financially? What's the lifestyle that you're going to have? What do you think you'll be doing with kids? How will that change? And if you're driven by passion and all of that is, you're good with it, gosh, you're in the right place. And those are the sports physical therapists that do exceptional, that are okay with no work-life balance in seasons. They're willing to put in the time, that are not bare minimum, and they just love what they do. If that's you, you're in the right space. So there you have it. That's what I would do for anybody considering sports PT, advancing further, taking a different job, working in cash pay, at a network, different opportunities. And if you find yourself stuck, still in the middle, or all in, and you're wondering, how do I get more exposure? How do I get more of this? I would say register for my Sports PT Kickstarter. This is what I created to get people just like you who are in that domain of all in, or I'm interested, I need to know more. If you're there, take my course. It's an 8-week mentorship course. It's online. I'll walk you through what it means to work with athletes, how to change your perspective, how to help these individuals, how to stay passionate, and all the problems that will lie ahead over the next 5 to 10 years. And if you're interested in taking the course, it is on my website, drchrisgarcia.com/Kickstarter. Register. I'd love to have you in there. For those of you who choose not to, or I'm out and I just kicked you out of sports PT and you're going to move on to orthopeds and geriatrics, absolute pleasure. For those of you who stay along and enjoy this ride on sports PT in cash, out of network, and helping people achieve the best version of themselves, I will catch you on the next episode. Take care. Hi, if you found this video helpful, please give it a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell notification for my weekly tips on treating cash pay patients, becoming that expert in your community, and thriving in business. Thanks, and I'll see you soon.